The story begins with a place called Alzano Imperial Magical Academy. With a history of 400 years, this academy is a higher learning place where you can learn top-notch magic. Rumia is a student in class 2 of the 2nd grade. For family circumstances, she temporarily stays at the house of her friend Sistine. They are classmates and get along quite well. They encounter Glenn, the male protagonist, on their way to school. Glenn is made to fly into the air by Sistine using whirlwind magic to stop him from running into them. Glenn quickly apologizes to them when he falls. He doesn't understand why Rumia seems so familiar to him. Sistine accuses Glenn of being a pervert because Glenn touches Rumia's body. Glenn is once more chased away by her using whirlwind magic, but she has no idea Glenn is their class's new professor. Glenn is incredibly lazy. He lacks enthusiasm for his job. He switches his magic class to a self-study session on his first day of work and dozes off at his desk. Sistine is not pleased with Glenn's action at all. Glenn is forcibly awakened and asked to teach them by Sistine. Glenn is awakened and unwillingly starts his lesson. His explanation of the spell is messy, and his handwriting is really sloppy. Glenn is the first person to exit the classroom when the bell rings. In fact, Glenn was once a magic genius, and at the age of 11 he was accepted into the Academy of Magic of Alzano Empire. However, his post-graduation resume is empty. In addition to lacking a teaching license, his abilities are barely average. Glenn's master, Celica, was important in enabling him to succeed as a professor. As an extremely skilled mage, Celica has attained the greatest degree. Glenn was accepted by the principal based on her strong recommendation. Glenn unintentionally enters the female locker room after school. He is quite different from others. He doesn't turn his head right away but instead tries to remember the scene. Glenn gets kicked out by Sistine using magic because she is so furious. Unexpectedly at lunch, she meets Glenn again. Sistine despises Glenn and believes he is unfit to hold the position of professor. Glenn forces his food into Sistine's mouth since he doesn't want to dispute with her. He didn't want to be a professor, but if he refuses Celica, he will be punished by her. Glenn was compelled to take the position because he feared Celica. Sistine despises Glenn's sour attitude on his job. She offers Glenn one final piece of advice in the afternoon lesson. Sistine has a lot of influence in the academy and comes from a strong magic family. Glenn will be fired by her father if he doesn't put in a lot of effort once more. Glenn unsurprisingly rejoices greatly at this. This attitude repulses Sistine. She decides to challenge Glenn because she believes he has tainted the magic. Glenn agrees to the challenge but requests that Sistine only use shock volt. The most basic form of magic uses a tiny quantity of electricity to paralyze the body. Glenn strangely is unable to use volt attacks, and he succumbs to Sistine rather soon. To be eligible for the prize, Sistine has to ask Glenn to teach them seriously. Glenn, though, declines to grant her request. He still comes to class with a very casual attitude, and he has turned every class into a self-study session. Sistine is quite disappointed in Glenn. She intervenes when Lynn, a female classmate, approaches Glenn with questions. She thinks magic is fantastic, but they are unable to learn anything about it because of Glenn. Glenn presents another viewpoint. He thinks that magic only ever kills. Sistine is adamant that magic is a true-seeking science. She is unable to concur with Glenn and slaps him out of frustration. After arguing with Sistine, Glenn feels unfit to continue as a professor. Just as he decides to apologize to Celica, he notices Rumia, who remains in the lab. Rumia is trying a magic array, but she runs into a bottleneck and can't make the magic array work. Glenn offers to assist her. A smile spreads across Rumia's face as soon as the magic array is activated. Glenn is brought back by her smile to a happier time when he shared Rumia's love of magic. Glenn questions Rumia about her intense love for magic. Rumia tells him that she wants to learn more about magic and then use it to benefit humanity. 3 years ago, Rumia was hunted down for family circumstances. She was saved by an unknown mage just as she was about to be slain. Rumia is very grateful to the mage and she wants to learn magic hard and repay his kindness. Before parting, Rumia wants Glenn to apologize to Sistine. Since Sistine's grandfather is no longer alive, magic is their only remaining connection. Her grandpa's greatest lifelong wish was to enter the flying castle. Sistine made the commitment to help his grandfather realize this wish before he passed away. After hearing Sistine's tale, Glenn feels so bad that he offers to apologize to her in front of the class. Glenn stops hiding his strength after this day. He instructs the students in magic in a wonderful way. Glenn's way of teaching is very unique. The highest degree of magic will not be constrained by spells, so he advises the trainees not to rely on them. Students like Glenn's classes. A few days later, he tops the list of popular teachers at the institution. Helping people makes Glenn feel good.
If you like my videos, you can support me by becoming a channel member, or you can donate me on Buy Me a Coffee. Your support will encourage me to make more videos. You can find links in the video description.
Yeah.
He feels very delighted when he sees the students' smiles. Glenn soon gets used to campus life, but he never anticipates being assassinated while walking. Glenn is incredibly perceptive, and he quickly learns that the group is affiliated with a malicious organization. Two other members of the evil organization enter the classroom in the meantime and attempt to apprehend Rumia. Sistine interrupts them, and as a result she too is dragged away. When Sistine is about to be violated, Glenn saves her. Glenn's skill is called the Fool's World, which can negate the activation of all magic. He then uses martial arts to defeat members of this evil organization. Glenn uses a communication bracelet to tell Celica about the combat after it has ended. Celica is unable to return for the time being because the evil group has destroyed the school's teleportation array. Glenn is compelled to take on the responsibility of guarding the students. At this point, a man by the name of Rake summons the Puppet Legion using magic. Glenn instructs Sistine to use her specialty magic to stall them, while he uses the strongest attack magic possible to take down the Puppet Legion. Glenn, however, is physically weary. As a result of the advanced magic being used forcibly, Rake is surprised by Glenn's strength. He shows up in front of Glenn freely after the Puppet Legion is defeated. Rake's weapon cannot currently be sealed by Sistine due to a lack of mana. Glenn shoves Sistine downstairs and tells her to look for a chance to ambush him when her mana recovers. Glenn and Sistine collaborate to seal Rake's weapon, and she assists Glenn in killing him. Sistine wants to treat Glenn. She uses all of her mana to cure Glenn before unintentionally falling asleep. Glenn makes the decision to rescue Rumia alone when he wakes up. The person who watches over Rumia was also a professor at the Academy of Magic named Huey. 2 teleportation arrays are set up in advance by Huey. Just wait for the teleportation array to send Rumia to the organization's base in another 10 minutes. Rumia will be slain by another teleportation array, even if Glenn dismisses the teleportation array before she gets teleported. Rumia asks Glenn to leave her alone since she doesn't want to bring him down. But Glenn doesn't want to go against his beliefs. Even though the magical world is filled with suffering, he wants to be a righteous messenger of magic and will not compromise his values. Glenn lifts the first teleportation array but unfortunately passes out. He makes an impression on Rumia. Rumia tries to get beyond the barrier and use her amplifier on Glenn. He regains his magic since Rumia has the ability to amplify magic 10 times. He eliminates Huey and lifts the final teleportation array on Rumia. After the crisis at Magical Academy, Celica tells Glenn a secret. Rumia's real identity is the princess of the Alzano Empire. The Alzano Empire claims that the amplifier is a representation of the devil and that people cannot tolerate it. If royals are skilled at amplifier, it could not be good for the nation. Due to Rumia's ownership of the amplifier, the royal family exiled her. Celica and the principal are the only people who currently know the secret. Glenn believes that he has nothing to do with the secret. He eventually learns to love teaching and is only interested in helping his students as much as possible. The magic tournament of the Alzano Empire Magical Academy is about to start. There are rumors that Her Majesty will attend the game on the day it takes place to watch it. Glenn is quite serious about winning this tournament. He arranges events for each student according to their strengths, and the reason he puts in so much effort is that he wants to win the reward. Glenn needs the bonus due to his tight financial situation. However, his class's conditions are not particularly good. It is customary for other classes to select the best students to participate in the competition repeatedly. Glenn's students must defeat the best players if he wants to win the game. When Glenn is worried about the competition, the issue of the practice field causes friction between Glenn's class and Class 1. Glenn consults with Haley, the teacher of Class 1, to resolve the dispute between the students. Haley urges Glenn to give up the practice field since he believes his team will win the game. Glenn is furious. He chooses to wager 3 months' worth of wages on Haley. Haley is highly certain of himself and is willing to wager on equal pay. At this point, Sistine believes Haley has insulted her classmates and charges him. Haley does not dispute Sistine's claims because Sistine is a descendant of the nobility. Sistine believes they will win the game and helps Glenn make the bet. But what she doesn't know is that Glenn regrets it so much and he feels sorry for his salary. If Sistine hasn't spoken, he would have apologized to Haley. With Sistine's help, the bet is made. In order to win the magic tournament, Glenn has to actively prepare for the competition. The magic tournament officially starts a week later. When Her Majesty the Queen shows in, she tries to mend fences with her daughter Rumia. 3 years ago, she abandoned Rumia and felt terrible about it. Following the competition, Rumia's class does well. Rumia takes part in a contest for mental strength. She hasn't seen Her Majesty in a while and is eager to prove her mettle. Rumia's efforts enable her to win the competition. Glenn is quite hungry after the morning round. He doesn't have any money to buy meals, so all he can do is enviously observe others' lunches. Lin then approaches Glenn at that point. Since Lin lacks confidence and will be competing in a transformation magic tournament, she requests Glenn to alter the competitor. Glenn is aware of Lin's passion for transformational magic. Glenn gives Lin some advice to help her become more self-assured. He takes Rumia's form and explains transformation magic to Lin. Lin resolves to put in a lot of effort to win with Glenn's support. Glenn is now mistaken for Rumia by Sistine, who wants to share a meal with him. Glenn can't say no to Sistine since he is starving, but Rumia shows up before he has the first bite. Glenn tries to steal Sistine's sandwiches, but she manages to erase his enchantment. She is so furious that she summons a whirlwind to chase Glenn away. In fact, Sistine has already made Glenn some sandwiches. Sistine threw the sandwiches away since they were fighting. Rumia picks it up and offers it to Glenn, since she thinks it would be a waste of food to throw it away. Glenn is incredibly satisfied after eating the sandwiches, unaware that Sistine made it for him. Glenn finishes his meal before Her Majesty arrives. Rumia is Her Majesty's priority, not Glenn. Rumia, however, refuses to acknowledge Her Majesty and refuses to acknowledge herself as a princess. Her Majesty is quite depressed. Rumia leaves the chat and doesn't come back to the game. She can't forget that Her Majesty left her, yet she can't help but crave a relationship with her. Glenn explains to Rumia that people are creatures who second-guess their decisions in his opinion. Rumia should follow her heart even if she later regrets it. Glenn was a court mage. He frequently visited the court as a result of his standing. He is aware that Her Majesty misses Rumia because he saw the identical jewelry on her. Rumia is advised by Glenn to be honest with Her Majesty. Rumia is detained by a gang of royal soldiers who accuse her of plotting to kill Her Majesty just as she is about to decide to go see her. Rumia is devastated because she believes Her Majesty plans to murder her. Glenn thinks the royal guard captain is pulling a scam here. He approaches Celica for assistance after rescuing Rumia. Although Celica is well aware of how difficult the situation facing the royal family is, she is powerless to assist Glenn. She wants Glenn to find a method to meet the Queen since she thinks he is the only person who can find a solution. Glenn is quite concerned about how to meet her. At this time, Glenn is assassinated by a mysterious girl.
Riel is the unidentified girl. She is a former co-worker of Glenn's and hails from the Imperial Court Mage Corps. After Glenn vanquishes Riel, Albert, her partner, appears. Albert orders them to put an end to their antics. Right now things are really tricky. Her Majesty is being observed by the Royal Guard. They choose to murder Rumia in defiance of Her Majesty's directives. Glenn resolves to work with the Court Mage Corps in order to save the Queen. He and Rumia use transfiguration magic to transform into Albert and Riel. Before the competition, Glenn asks Class 2 to win the magic tournament so that he can meet Her Majesty at the time of the award. On the field, Lin performs admirably after being coached by Glenn. All of the other students also perform well. Sistine is the final to show up. Her magical power is excellent and she triumphs with a clear advantage. In the end, the magic tournament is won by Class 2. Glenn reverses the enchantment of the metamorphosis once the award ceremony has started. He wants Her Majesty to punish the guards captain after exposing the guards captain's murder of Rumia. Her Majesty unexpectedly becomes under the grip of the guards and is compelled to decide to assassinate Rumia. Her Majesty doesn't really want to kill Rumia. Glenn realizes after considering everything she has done for her. Glenn surmises that the jewelry worn by Her Majesty is flawed. He disables magic by using skill to accomplish this. When the necklace's enchantment is removed, Her Majesty expresses her actual feelings. She regrets hurting Rumia because she has always loved her dearly. Meanwhile, Albert discovers the maid of Her Majesty who performed the spell on the necklace. The maid's name is Charlotte and she belongs to the evil organization. She uses a teleportation array to flee after being discovered by Albert. Albert then tells Glenn about it in the hopes that he would be vigilant. Glenn meets Rumia after Albert departs. Rumia is immensely appreciative of Glenn's assistance. She is just wondering about how Glenn was able to determine that Her Majesty was lying. Glenn adds that when Rumia was abducted, the Queen sent him a request. She was sobbing and pleading with him to locate Rumia. Since Glenn is aware of how much Her Majesty values Rumia, he believes that she would never intentionally harm her. When Rumia learns that Glenn is the one who has saved her, she is moved. Glenn then shows up for their class's celebration event. He spends all of his prize money and bet winnings at the restaurant because of the exorbitant prices. Over the time, Glenn gives special training to Sistine. If Sistine wants to protect Rumia, she must learn military magic. In order to improve her physical fitness, Glenn decides to teach her boxing first. Glenn and Sistine aren't the only ones who care about Rumia's life. The Imperial Army does as well. Riel is tasked to guard Rumia in secret. She enrolls as a transfer student and is put in Rumia's class. Her classmates are impressed by Riel's strength and magic prowess. Riel gradually integrates into campus life with Rumia and Sistine's assistance. Glenn takes the students on a field trip a week later. He picks an island as his destination. Glenn is overjoyed to see his female students dressed in swimsuits. The male students decide to break into the female students' hostel after dark. This is one of the fundamental programs for guys. Unexpectedly, Glenn learns of their plans and tries to stop them. Glenn then is in a heated argument with his male students. They are not as powerful as Glenn, therefore their scheme fails. Riel is currently being taken to the beach by Sistine and Rumia, where they have a terrific time. Glenn is happy to see them interacting and having fun. He is unaware that Riel dislikes Sistine and Rumia. She is furious because she believes they have snatched Glenn. Riel is not mentally stable. She and Rumia argue later on her school excursion. Glenn notes that Riel has a relatively young mental age and that she only occasionally develops a bias. He will be in charge of tracking down Riel and is hoping that they won't make a scene. Albert notices that someone is sneakily approaching Riel in the meantime. He tries to rescue Riel from his predicament, but Charlotte stops him. Glenn spends some time looking before finding Riel by the sea when Albert and Charlotte are at war, but he never anticipates Riel attacking him. She not only stabs Glenn but also kidnaps Rumia. Sistine watches Riel inflicting harm on Rumia, but she is too scared to use magic on Riel. Albert brings the hurt Glenn to their room after Rumia is taken away. Glenn suffers severe wounds. Glenn needs Sistine's assistance because healing him requires a lot of mana. Together they assist Glenn in regaining consciousness. Albert tells Glenn that he has long guessed that Riel would be used by evil organizations. He intends to use Rumia as bait to destroy the evil organization hiding behind it. Albert pisses Glenn off a lot. Albert thinks Glenn has betrayed them. Riel would not have strayed if he has not abandoned the Imperial Court Mage Corps. Glenn feels so bad that he promises to save Riel. Albert settles with Glenn. After getting his assurances, he hands over Riel to Glenn, telling him his first job is to save Rumia. Thankfully, they installed tracking magic on Rumia, making it simple to locate the whereabouts of the evil organization. But one of the members of the evil organization disguises himself as Riel's brother and orders Riel to kill Glenn. He deceives Riel, who then insists on defeating Glenn. Glenn uses magic to lock Riel up while attacking members of the evil organization. Reminded by Glenn, Riel reminisces about her past. Sion is the name of her brother and they both belong to the evil organization. Later, Sion betrayed the organization, gave Glenn access to the inside knowledge and requested that he save Riel. But Sion paid the price for betrayal with his life. Glenn implanted Riel's memory into the clone's head since the evil organization was creating a clone at the time and Riel was severely hurt. Riel feels terribly depressed after regaining her memory since she now believes she is only a puppet. Glenn, however, explains to her that she is not a puppet because a puppet is thoughtless, but she will live for precious things. She realizes that her mind has gone awry and takes the initiative to eliminate all the clones. Glenn defeats the members of the evil organization and completes his mission to save Riel and Rumia. Rumia and Sistine forgive Riel for her mistakes and become friends with her again. In the following story, Sistine's fiancé Leos comes to teach at the Alzano Empire Magical Academy. Sistine thinks the engagement thing is just a joke they had when they were kids and they can't be considered fiancés. Unexpectedly, Leos likes her very much and confesses love to her in public. Leos will not give up. He pops the question to Sistine while they are alone. Sistine turns Leos down. Her goal is to discover the Sky Castle's mysteries. She has to gain more knowledge of magic in order to fulfill this dream. Leos wants Sistine to help him in his studies of military magic since he believes Sistine's dream is impractical. Glenn overhears their conversation. He is disgusted with Leos and feels that Sistine is out of his league. Leos thinks their business has nothing to do with Glenn and argues with him. In order to get rid of Leos, Sistine deliberately states that she and Glenn are in love. Glenn, seeing through Sistine's intentions, challenges Leos as a fiancé. Leos accepts the challenge and agrees to discuss the date and modalities of the duel another day. Soon after, Glenn and Leos decide to fight in a team battle. They instruct the students of the 2nd and 4th classes respectively to conduct magic competitions. In terms of combat effectiveness, Class 4 is indeed stronger than Class 2. However, Glenn from the Imperial Court Mage Corps excels at working as a team. He also lays traps in the arena to help him win the duel. Glenn and Leos are deadlocked at the conclusion of the 3-hour fight. Glenn chooses to battle against Leos alone and sets the time for a day later because Leos insists on having the outcome. Sistine is quite irate that she is not the wager being used in the competition. She finds it particularly depressing as Glenn has consistently claimed that if Leos wins he can marry her and lead a luxurious life. She is perplexed by Glenn's statement. She slaps Glenn in a fury. Rumia doesn't comprehend Glenn's behavior either, but she believes in his integrity and surmises that he must have other motivations. Sistine chooses to speak with Glenn as a result of Rumia's comfort. Glenn remarks to Sistine that she reminds him of his former friend Sarah after their meeting. Since he was a young child, Glenn has wanted to be a good mage, but he found out that the mage profession was bloody and not as good as he thought when he joined the Imperial Court Mage Corps. Glenn grew to despise magic after being overtaken by the harsh reality. If Sarah hadn't always supported his dream, he would have chosen to give up. Unfortunately, he made a mistake during a mission that led to Sarah's death. Glenn was hit so hard that he gave up his dream and left Imperial Court Mage Corps. Glenn first met Sistine at Magical Academy and was immediately impressed by her drive and desire to succeed. Glenn is rattled that Leos has insulted Sistine's dream, which is why he wants to defeat Leos. The appearance of Leos at this time ends their conversation. He believes Glenn is lying and that Glenn has a violent and bloody history. Glenn assaults Leos out of enmity. Leos' strength, however, is something he does not anticipate. Glenn can be defeated by Leos without the use of magic at all. Glenn departs and Leos demands that Sistine wed him by threatening her with Rumia and Riel. Sistine anticipates Glenn rescuing her. Glenn, though, is never seen in the academy again after that day. Sistine agrees to Leo's marriage proposal in order to defend her friends. Rumia is so worried that she informs Glenn of Sistine's marriage and asks him for assistance in solving the problem. Glenn believes Sistine is not consensual and vows to prevent the wedding. Glenn flees with Sistine on the wedding day. He has been studying magic diligently in order to defeat Leos. During this period, a group of drug users shows up in the college. All of them mutate into zombies and rush to Glenn. Glenn is taken aback. Also slain by illegal narcotics was Sarah. Glenn eliminates all the zombies to prevent Sistine from experiencing the same tragedy as Sarah. When Sistine notices Glenn's homicidal appearance, she is afraid. Leos catches up with them before she can figure out how to deal with Glenn. Glenn reveals Leo's true face. It's Jadis, his former co-worker. Jadis executed Leos after the group battle. Glenn is dueled by Jadis using Leos and Sistine. Glenn is aware that he must face Jadis. Sistine is urged to go and he stays behind to handle Jadis. Jadis's goal is to uphold justice, but despite this he continues to murder. He desires to possess the Akashic records in order to rule the world. Glenn and Jadis fight fiercely, but he never anticipates Sistine really returning to assist him. Sistine is aware of how she feels toward Glenn. She wants Glenn to be by her side always because she views him as an irreplaceable individual. Glenn and Sistine team up to defeat Jadis. Before fleeing, Jadis tells Glenn that the Alzano Empire is dissolving and that he can't wait until he sees him once more. At the end of the story, Glenn resumes his position as a professor. Everyone is happy to see him back. And that's the end of the video. Don't forget to give me a like and subscribe to my channel. I will bring more excitement anime in the future. Thanks for watching. Bye.